Welcome to Palestine Bookshelf. I'm Stephen Heiner, and today we're going to be discussing Peace in the Promised Land, a Realist Scenario. This is a collection of essays, and I actually did a longer review of this back on my Stephen Heiner channel, back when I thought I was just going to cover a few books about Israel and Palestine and move on with my regular book channel, and instead it morphed into this project years later. And so I feel pretty good, even though that review was done very early on in the project when I knew really nothing comparatively speaking. I'm happy with that review. I'm going to leave it in place. I'll put a link in the description as well as a card. So what I'll do instead today, this book was written in 2006. I'm simply going to read from the concluding essay, which was written by Dr. Thomas Fleming and David Hartman. And I think it summarizes the state of play in 2006. This is before the Hamas election, or probably right around the time of it. But there was a feeling that something could happen with Hamas. And you can reflect as to how much things have changed or not changed since this time. Politics has been called the art of the possible, and the old cliche is especially apt within the narrow confines of Palestinian-Israeli negotiations over the decades. A breakthrough may be possible if and when the parties learn to look at the contentious issues not only from the point of view of their own anxieties and ambitions, but from the vantage point of their opponents' interests and fears. Neither side so far has displayed any willingness to walk in the shoes of the other party. No part of the region's history is exempt from a one-sided polemical approach. Each side has a well-rehearsed litany of complaints against the other. When Israelis point to the continuing violence of Palestinian terrorists who attack women and children, Palestinians retort with their own familiar tale of how a minority of Zionist colonists from Europe, backed by Britain and the United States, terrorized and expelled the Palestinians from the lands of their ancestors, and even today do not refrain from applying harsh military methods to civilian areas, where impoverished refugees live without hope. Each side has a valid basis for their complaints. I would disagree with Dr. Fleming here. But neither side can expect any progress, either toward greater Israeli security or toward a viable and prosperous Palestinian state, so long as the antagonists are exclusively focused on questions of history and religion. Israel is a fact that must be dealt with on the basis of reality, but so are the impoverished Palestinian refugees. No less important is the self-restraint that the parties must learn to exercise during negotiations. Their commitment to refrain from provocative acts, or to avoid overreacting to any such acts from the other side, would make it harder for extremists to undermine the process. Here, too, both sides have reason for complaint. If Palestinian terrorists have all too often succeeded in derailing the peace process, continued Israeli settlement of occupied territory has had the same effect. The United States should make assistance to the parties contingent upon their good behavior, repression of terrorism for the Palestinian Authority, a moratorium on new settlements, and phased removal from an agreed list of existing ones for Israel. Suggested alterations to pre-1967 borders will remain an obstacle to peace because they seek to reduce Palestine to a patchwork of enclaves. A stable final settlement will require Israel's acceptance of the old Green Line as its eastern border, with some possible territorial swaps that are mutually agreed. Among other serious obstacles are the poverty and hopelessness of the Palestinians, inadequate access to water and other vital resources that would be required for development of Palestinian agriculture and industry, and the corruption, ineptitude, and intransigence of Palestinian politicians who have pocketed or squandered much of the financial assistance and have repeatedly rejected Israeli proposals without offering any constructive or realistic counterproposals of their own. The last of these four obstacles may be removed by the rise of Hamas as the leading political force in the Palestinian Authority and the collapse of the old corrupt Fatah establishment. If you'd like to learn more about Hamas, I've done a book review on Tareq Baconi's Hamas Hamas book. So if you'd like to see that, there'll be a link in the description as well as a card. However, the Hamas victory also creates equally serious problems on other fronts. At the time of this writing, Hamas has not abandoned its declared intention to destroy Israel. On the other hand, the PLO held the same objective until the art of the possible forced it to revise its charter after Oslo II. On the positive side, the Palestinian Authority is more democratic today than it has been at any time, but the readiness of Hamas to respect their Israeli neighbors will depend largely on what is offered to the Palestinian side and on what the United States does in the region. For the present, Hamas has the power of veto over any eventual peace package that a weakened President Mahmoud Abbas may deliver. Although a bitter pill for the Israelis to swallow, the Hamas victory may prove, in the end, to be something of a blessing in disguise, since the Palestinians will now be represented by a party that more accurately reflects the views of the Palestinians themselves. A commitment from Hamas may be more believable than the promises made by Fatah politicians under Western influence. The victory of Hamas and the success of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt present the United States with a dilemma. Although Washington would like to see the election of secular reformers and technocrats, such are unelectable for the time being at least. Unfortunately, the United States bears some of the responsibility for the political success of militant Islamic parties. The continuing presence of U.S. troops in Iraq, combined with a continuing bias in favor of Israel, makes the United States more thoroughly disliked throughout the Muslim world than at any time in living memory. Whatever Washington hopes for, the locals will want more of the opposite. American support for any leader or party will be reason enough for the street to reject them the moment it suspects that there is a connection. Even if, quote, exporting democracy, unquote, could be developed into a workable scenario, and Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak is unlikely to risk a second experience in democracy after the success of the Muslim Brotherhood in December 2005, the end result would be detrimental to U.S. security. Instead of a degenerate and scared royal kleptocracy, Osama bin Laden's Puritan followers would run Saudi Arabia. Iraq would, and probably will, be ruled by Shiite clerics, supported by party militias dressed in government uniforms. In Egypt and Algeria immediately, in Morocco after a short while perhaps, and eventually even in Turkey, moderate and pro-Western regimes would be undermined. The mistrust of America is deep, and it transcends political, cultural, geographic, social, and economic divisions within the Muslim world. Only a constructive settlement brokered by the United States would offer a solution to America's problems in the Middle East. This book has sketched out the parameters of the problems and offers a set of basic criteria for any practical solution. So I'm going to pause here for a moment. If you are enjoying content like this, please hit like, subscribe. It's a free way for you to help share this content with people who might be interested. The moment for my pause, yes, sure, it's to hit like and subscribe, but I wanted to pause here because I disagree with Dr. Fleming and Mr. Hartman's assertion that the United States would be the power broker here. The United States is not a neutral party. They are a co-genocidal party in this conflict, so they cannot be considered an honest broker. Whatever may have been the case in 2006, in 2025, with U.S. presidential candidates writing little messages on bombs dropped by the Israelis on the Palestinian people, the United States cannot be considered a serious broker to peace here. Who else it could be? China, Russia, a coalition of other people? I don't know, but it certainly cannot be the United States. The United States may have to be one of the enforcers of any final solution, peace process, however you might want to think about it. But they can't be the party at the table because basically they're sitting on Israel's side of the table. They're not sitting in between the two parties. So I disagree that the United States would be able to do anything that would be trusted by anybody. And that's because we've earned everybody's distrust by our actions and by our words. According to these criteria, the maps of the region could be remade from battle lines to corridors of commerce, from flashpoints of destruction to development areas, and from war zones to states in peaceful and one day perhaps even friendly coexistence. The responsibility for plus some peace accords between Israel and Palestine lies in the hands of the two parties, however, and not in those of the United States, the Arab League, or the United Nations. Once peace is agreed, however, international economic development assistance can help it solidify by providing peaceful prosperity for Israel, Palestine, and their Middle Eastern neighbors. The United States should not be expected to shoulder this burden alone. Europe and the oil-rich states of the Middle East also have a stake in a peaceful outcome. This point needs to be underscored. A settlement of the refugees and a timely and generous contribution to Palestinian relief might have accomplished much in the early days of the conflict. Today, all the money in the world might be too little to end the conflict entirely, but the economic development of Palestine, combined with practical assistance for the Palestinian refugees scattered throughout the Middle East, would undoubtedly strengthen the arguments for a peaceful solution. Those arguments are sound and need to be debated freely on both sides of the Atlantic, An important objective of this book is to rekindle debate about them in the United States. It is a strange fact that there is far more freedom of discussion and lively debate and far sharper criticism of Israeli policies in Israel herself than here in America. And I would say maybe that was true in 2006, but you can't even criticize Israel much these days inside Israel without getting into trouble. Finally, it is time for the parties to get beyond the betrayals, mistakes, and lost opportunities of the past 5 decades that have resulted in an apparent impasse. It is time to confront the realities of the present. Israel is one of those realities that is not going to go away, whatever the leaders of Hamas are telling their followers. Another reality is the Palestinian people, who will have a state they can call their own, whatever the leaders of Likud might say to their followers. The sooner this is achieved, the better it will be for both Palestinians and Israelis. And I would argue here that it's not the Palestinians who are unwilling to share the land. This has been demonstrated by Hamas's outreach to Israel on the 67 borders. The problem is Israel is currently ruled by a coalition that includes settlers who are maximalists, for whom the occupied territories are not sufficient. They want the East Bank of the Jordan as well. They want the Sinai. They want beyond the Golan. They want to go up. They've stated they want all of Lebanon as well. So the maximalists are in charge of the government, or at least they play a part in keeping the coalition government alive in Israel, and more people have tacitly supported their position since October the 7th. So again, I have to push back on the both sides narrative here that, well, both sides have to give something up. Well, there's one party that is the power broker, the powerful person here, and the other person who is the victim. The idea of painting the Palestinians as the powerful party here flies reality. It's the Israelis who have to decide what they want to do. And do they want to continue the expansionist settler project that started in the 1880s and encompasses Greater Israel and encompasses a patch that some IDF soldiers wear, which remakes Israel as Greater Israel, that encompasses parts or all of other countries in the region? Is that the future, or is a two-state or one-state solution possible? It's all up to Israel. That's the difference, is painting this idea, well, Palestinians have to do this and the Israelis have to do this. It's really all on the Israelis. The Palestinians can conform themselves to any good faith deal that is offered to them. They are a resilient people. It is not clear that Israel can survive the collapse of the Zionist project. It's not clear at all. But it's clear that the Palestinians can survive whatever has been thrown at them, and they will continue to survive. They're the ones who are most likely to survive the end of this conflict. The Zionist state cannot survive the end of this conflict. And I think that's the issue, is that I don't even know if the word Zionist was mentioned one time in this entire essay. But that's what we're dealing with when we're dealing with Israel. The idea that Israel is some secular political reality with no ties to this religious craziness that Zionism brings to it. This entire project was started by Zionism, and it has to end with the end of Zionism, so that whatever may come out, and if it still wants to be called Israel, that's fine, but whatever comes out of that project, if it's a separate state for the Jewish people that is called Israel, and a separate state called Palestine, or a joint, a single state for both entities, it doesn't matter. What matters is that Israel is the one who is going to have to move. The Palestinians have demonstrated over and over that they're open to any sort of deals that respects them as human beings, deserving of dignity and respect. The Israelis are not willing to do this. That's why the two-state solution has been dead on arrival for decades. Everyone's interested in a two-state solution except Israel. And as long as that's the case, then it's stupid to talk about a two-state solution. Although the struggles of the Middle East have had and continue to have a religious dimension, there is also some common ground. Despite profound differences among the three religious traditions of the Middle East, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam all acknowledge the basic principles enunciated in the Ten Commandments. Christian Americans, in analyzing some of the moral questions at the root of the conflict, would do well to bear in mind the commandments against murder, theft, and coveting, sins frequently committed by both sides. Again, I'm not going to allow this both sides thing to pass. As well as the admonition, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. When a majority of Israelis accord the Palestinians the same right to a homeland that they have won, And when a majority of Palestinians learn to view the murder of Israelis with some of the same moral outrage they express when their own children are killed, they will have laid the true foundations of a lasting peace in the Promised Land. I think it's a nice rhetorical flourish, but it again plays into the both sides ism, which we have to fight against. This is not a question of both sides. This is not two equals at a bargaining table where one just has to give up and the other one has to give up like some kind of chess match. We have a giant towering over somebody else in a cage, pouring hot water and sticking those people in a cage. That's what's going on. And to make it seem like, well, the Israelis have to give something up, the Palestinians have to give something, that is simply a dishonest framing of it. And I'm not saying the authors of this article were dishonest. I'm saying that they may not have looked into the issue enough to frame it so evenly, that it's just a question of the Palestinians and Israelis agreeing to something. There is a huge disparity between these parties, exacerbated by the United States putting their hand on the scale for Israel. Without the United States, Israel could not have prosecuted this conflict for as long as it has. Money and weapons, that's what Israel uses. Without money and weapons, Israel collapses. And that's what the future holds. And that's why I resisted the idea of the United States has to help, broker this peace. No, I don't think the United States deserves a seat at the table. Maybe a seat at the table in terms of enforcement of whatever comes out, but certainly not sitting at the table as if it's some honest broker. The United States is not an honest broker in this conflict. And there is no such thing as both sides when it comes to this conflict. The harm, murder, what he lists there, theft, coveting, murder, etc., it's almost all on one side if we stack it up. And I don't want to get into counting one versus the other, but the point is everyone can see with their eyes now what they couldn't maybe see in 2006. We have video, we have social media, we know who's doing the murdering, we know who's targeting men, women, and children, unarmed. And we know that when you call it a war, it's really not serious because a war would intimate battles between two armies, and that's not what's happening. We have a civilian population being carpet bombed, and no real battles with any real armies. And that's what's going on. So I think some good points are made in the essay in general, but the thing that has to be resisted the most anytime anyone wants to talk about this is some sense of both sides. This is not a both sides issue. This is Israel's issue. And until Israel decides that it wants to live in peace with its neighbors and with the people they consider inferior to themselves, which will require a sea change and the end of Zionism as practiced, there will be no change. There will be no peace in the Promised Land. And I might note, I read this in my original review, the editor of this group of essays, Dr. Trifkovic, wrote in July 2021 to Stephen, with my apologies for the misleading title of this volume, there is no scenario, realist or otherwise, for a lasting peace after all. That's a rather glum way to end things, but he was the editor of the volume, so he did more of this, and I would argue probably Dr. Trifkovic has studied potentially more than most people have, so he's entitled to his opinion. I still hope for a solution, realist or otherwise. If you'd like to get a copy of this book, you can find it using a link in the description below. It's one of the ways you can support this channel. You can also support us by hitting like, subscribe, sharing this content with other people who might be interested. If you'd like to thank me for this presentation, there's links to Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal below, as well as links to Patreon and YouTube membership if you want to support me on an ongoing basis, get early access to videos like this one, chat with me behind the scenes, and also get access to videos that I don't upload to the general public. They're just for my members and patrons. You'll also see a link to my Amazon wishlist below. If you want to sponsor a book for the future, get it reviewed, you can buy a copy for me, send it to me, and I'll do my best to review it in a timely manner. You'll also see a link below to the Palestine Children's Relief Fund as we move towards monetization of the channel. Our hope is to send 100% of the profits, whatever they may be, to the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. They help Palestinian children get medical care who could not otherwise get it. Support them directly, go to the website, check them out, or support them indirectly by watching as many videos as you can here and help us get towards our goal of monetization. Until next time, enjoy your reading.